Well, well. We have some major news. We have an update. We have a major piece of the puzzle that will be Rich Rodriguez's second tenure as West Virginia's head coach. And not official yet. I will preface that for this live chat edition of Mountaineer Report here on WVU Sports Now. I am Mike Asti, and I am flying it solo for this live chat edition of the show. So feel free to join me, chat along, and if not, you will just hear me rant. So once again, apologies for any of the podcast listeners archive. This is a live chat edition of the show, so maybe not exactly your conventional pod. But we did this during the coaching search. We've done this a bit recently. They've done well. So I feel like why not give it a shot now? Because as I said, we have a major development in Rich Rod's coaching staff, and that is the defensive coordinator. That is the major position, and that is the most important position on Rod's staff. That is 100% the case because he is going to be running the offense, regardless of who has the OC title, and he, of course, is the head coach. Rich Rodriguez is going to have his hands on the offense. It's going to be his offense. It's going to be his plays. He's going to be calling those plays. So Chad Scott is reportedly being retained. I highly doubt he's the offensive coordinator from what I'm hearing. And, of course, if you retain a coach, that does not mean they are immediately in the same position that they were in. And that could definitely be part of recruiting. That could definitely be part of trying to keep Jaheim White in particular, obviously, who we've all been alluding to. And maybe he will have an OC role. I can't guarantee it won't be OC. I don't think so. But it doesn't matter because he was OC under Brown when Brown called plays too. It's going to be the same. It's going to be all about Rich Rodriguez's offense and what he wants. Everyone knows that. Defensively, though, it's going to be somebody else leading the way. Rich Rodriguez has had great defensive coordinators around him throughout his career when his defenses have been good, going from West Virginia to Arizona's success, even obviously not much at Michigan, to even what happened recently at Jacksonville State. He had great defensive coaches. And of course, Jeff Castile is now also reportedly coming back to be a part of the staff, not the DC, just a part of the staff. I've heard analyst, maybe analyst type consultant role, which means he's not pounding the pavement every single day, which means he's not really doing as much recruiting work as, say, Scott or Blaine Stewart would be doing, which means he's not as involved. It's kind of that role that Dana Holgorsen complained about that he was doing at TCU briefly before going to Nebraska. So you're not really as involved. He's almost like that overseer because he's worked with Rich Rod. He's had success with Rich Rod. It's great to have him on the staff for sure. That's not negative at all. But he's not the DC. Zac Alley now is going to be the defensive coordinator for the Mountaineers. And it's what I've been hearing for a while. I had him initially as one of the top two candidates. And it's always because I've been hearing his name floated for a long while. I expected his name to float. His name's been floating. His name is now moving into the national media in terms of being floated with Pete Thamel reporting that they are working out a 3-year deal. Maybe you'd rather it be longer, but they're plucking a DC, a sitting defensive coordinator, and Oklahoma's season was rough, but it wasn't really because the defense was bad. That defense helped beat Bama. That defense still competed well in their bowl game loss to Navy. And he's a young up-and-coming defensive coordinator. He's viewed as that around the country. He's obviously worked with Rich Rod, and then working with Rich Rod promoted him to a major Power 4 school, a blue blood in Oklahoma, despite them being down a little bit in recent years as they're now in the SEC. So that was a major coup, a major job for him. And instead of continuing on or maybe trying to get to a better program eventually than even OU, yes, let's be real, he goes down programs. I mean, despite Oklahoma being down, they had the same record as West Virginia, and they're a blue blood. So going from Oklahoma to West Virginia is a step down program-wise, whether it's historic or even right now. But with Rich Rod coming back, he gets to work with Rich Rod again. The Big 12's wide open. There is money there. I'm sure he's going to be paid well. He's going to be running the defense. He's not going to be co-DC. It's going to be his ship. It's going to be his situation, going to be his plays, going to be up to him. And Rich Rod's going to certainly put a lot of confidence in him because he knows him and because he's going to have more of his hands on the offense than worrying about the defense. That is a major coup to pluck a sitting defensive coordinator, even from a struggling team. And of course, you're not going to pluck a coordinator from a team that's vying for national title. You need the team to be struggling for maybe him to be looking elsewhere. And that's what happened. And maybe if it's not Rich Rod, this wouldn't be happening because they have the connection, because now there's obviously more money from the staff to the NIL. I mean, Rich Rod has $5 million just off the base staff to use, just to hire the staff. Defensive coordinator, every other coaching position. A lot of this is likely going to go to Zac Alley, but that is the most important position, bar none, under Rich Rod because he's the offensive guy. You need a star defensive guy, a young one, who if they end up vying for a Big 12 next year, you certainly could possibly be losing the man, but you need a top coordinator, especially on the D side, right away. And they got it. And it sends a message that, yeah, Big 12, not SEC. West Virginia's not Oklahoma, whether it be historic or even now, may never be, because there's money there, even if there's more coming to West Virginia. But they still steal a sitting Power 4 coach, a coordinator, not even just a lower level coach. And yeah, they're not doing it roster wise, even though they are sending more offers to power players than people think. But no, they're not impressing anybody, including myself, roster-wise. But this is still December. They didn't have a defensive coordinator. A lot of these announcements haven't been made. Yeah, there's more money. The staff's still in flux. Those recruiting people under Brown are still there. They're still getting paid. That decision isn't fully until January. Many of them maybe will even be back. Likely not. I wouldn't mind if they came back because they're a big reason why they actually had a solid early signing day. And I think they were great under Brown, despite the overall program shortcomings, obviously. But we will see. I would imagine that the spring portal period is going to be much more important and going to be very active for West Virginia. And any player that doesn't make his team or maybe wants to go elsewhere, or maybe they're talking to that whole time as they get even more money to come in, maybe they can even pluck players then. The players matter for sure, but this still sends a message getting Zac Alley. The whole time I've heard about him, I never was 100% just because of just West Virginia hesitation, really. I kept hearing his name. He was always the guy. That was their number one. I even told somebody recently, it's going to be Zac Alley, and if it's not him, he turned it down. If it's not him, he turned it down. He didn't turn it down. He did not turn it down. And he's now the West Virginia Mountaineers defensive coordinator. I do see some of you in the chat, so I'm going to go to the chat here. Again, flying solo on this live chat edition of Mountaineer Report. West Virginia looks like they have the defensive coordinator. It is a young up-and-coming coach plucked from a Power 4, from a blue blood, and from the SEC. That's a big deal. That's a sentence that I didn't think anyone would be saying, and certainly didn't get said under Brown. And, respect to Brown, the era had to end. He didn't win enough, despite being a great guy and doing a lot of other things right. But he had $3.5 million to play with for his staff. He made a little bit more than Rich Rod's getting now, $4 million to $3.75. Brown at his peak was getting 4.4, which is obviously more than enough here. But 4 to 3.75 and more of an average, and that's where he whittled it down on his last extension. That's a lot closer. But even with that being closer, $3.5 million to play with for his staff is a lot different than $5 million. That $1.5 million is a major difference. There was no ability to pluck anyone from a major program for Neil Brown. And now Rich Rod has that ability, and the most important position, he does it, even though the rest of the staff looks like are also young coaches, a lot of up-and-comers too, but a lot of Jack State people. He's going to bring in people he knows, whether it's player or coaches, and I get the concern there because they – Conference USA is not the Big 12, but this is somebody, yeah, he was with them before, but this is also now plucked. He's factually plucked from Oklahoma, not Jack State, because Oklahoma wanted him and they didn't fire him, and he chose to leave to come to West Virginia. That's a gigantic deal, Yeah, so the reason why we're here for the first question there is, did we get the DC yet? I want to preface this again for any of the pod listeners. This is a live chat, so what you're listening to 2 days from now may be old news. I keep getting comments, emails, and whatever that, hey, this, it's already happened, it's already in stone. Why are you late? I ain't late. This is a live chat here. Learn what a live chat is. So reportedly right now from Pete Thamel, and I've been hearing this for weeks. It's been floated by others for sure. None of myself, in terms of myself, WVU media, have fully confirmed it prior to now. But some of this, let's be honest here, my sources, everyone's sources, people within the program that talk to people in media, etc., that's not who's telling Pete Thamel. That's not who's telling football scoops. And everyone knows that. You're getting leaks from agents of these coaches. That's why the national media usually breaks the big news. That's why when it becomes a program really on the rise, you're going to see more coverage from the national media because they're getting it. They're caring more than they may have before, and they're getting it from the agents. So it's not to say we don't have any agent sources. We do. I do. I have, plenty out there. I have donor sources. I've proven that to you guys in the past, even getting a donor on the record in the midst of the Bob Huggins scandal. I have sources within Country Road Trust. I'm going to say that, and I've proven that as well, and that's pretty clear, that that's the case based on my relationships there. I have plenty of sources, okay, within or outside of WVU. There was a reason why I was able to break the Andy Kornicki news, okay? I'm more than just local media. I do national work. I'm technically national media as well, even though obviously I'm not Pete Thamel by any means. So I have connections there. But no, these would be – I didn't feel comfortable breaking it. I didn't have the confirmation. And Pete Thamel claims he does. They're working on a 3-year deal. He's getting it from the agent. Kudos to him. Feather in his cap yet again. Let's go here on the chat. Great. Now we need more D assistants. I'm assuming that's what you're typing there. Then bring in, I don't know what that word is, but I'm assuming more players. And yeah, again, as I said, they certainly need players. They certainly don't have enough right now. If these are the players, if this is the roster, no matter who's the coach, they got to go in the portal more in the spring. They did it last year a little bit actually, but they got to go more in the spring this year than ever before. And this December chaos is going to happen when you have a coaching change. When Nick Saban retired, they lost 5-star recruits and lost players. And we've seen Alabama, they dipped a little bit. They lose some games. You lose to Oklahoma, the aforementioned Oklahoma Sooners, a rough season. You lose to Vanderbilt. You're not a playoff team. Whereas prior with Saban, you're vying for a national title every single season, and you're in the playoff. Little different. Still great, but little different. A step down a little bit. And that sometimes can happen, guys. You're going to have December chaos. You're going to lose players. The players go to schools. I keep preaching this. They go to schools for two main reasons these days. And there might be others, but two main reasons. The coaching staff, in no particular order, the coaching staff and money. And yes, West Virginia has more money now. They have more donations coming in. The NIL was 3.4 about with Brown on an average, certainly the last year or so. Not much came in after the Mayo Bowl. For whatever reason, that was a 9-win year, and then not much came in after that, when prior to that, they were in top 30 in NIL just as a company overall, and donations of the last 20 years, even before CRT existed. But I don't know where that ranking overall for the group lays now. But I can tell you that the NIL was at 3.4, and Brown kind of confirmed it with Hoppy Kirschbro on Talkline. And they're projecting it, from what I'm hearing, that they're looking for it at minimum to be anywhere from 6 to 9 mil. The 20 million figure people are throwing out there, I don't believe is happening, nor do you need it. You're not competing with Ohio State in the Big 12. They're not on your out-of-conference schedule. Your out-of-conference schedule is now easier. Penn State's off. You still have the Brawl, but it's what Ren wants, the FCS, Group of 5, and FBS, at least for next year. And then you do have the Virginia matchup there for a neutral site and money coming in there, and then it's mostly regular the rest of the way after that. And I know Ren's going to give you that schedule. That's what he wants. That's what I've been preaching. That's what he's been preaching. That's what's going to happen. And then you just got to worry about the Big 12 really to get in. So 6 to 9 is a much better situation, a lot more money to play with in the Big 12 in comparison of your peers. I mean, that's more getting to, as we talked about, Iowa State. They haven't won a conference title since 1912. A handful of bowl wins in 100+ years, a way worse program historically than West Virginia, but they had a better year and they vied for the conference crown. They won 10 games most of the year despite not going to Dallas. And that's more of where they were because they got an influx of NIL. West Virginia's going to at least get to that neighborhood, you would imagine, and then maybe more. McAfee's already excited off the DC hire. Maybe more will come in. But we're right now at a Pete Thamel report, but he doesn't throw things out there just to throw it out there. Once again, George, I know you're talking to people who maybe doubted the Rich Rod hire. Did it change your mind yet? I want to make this clear, too. Obviously, this is great news for the program, for Rich Rod, to be able to pluck a DC, 100%. And the money is going to be a much better situation, whether it be donations, whether it be just in general. He has more to play with for his staff. That already tells you something right there, despite the annual salary being closer. But I want to also make this clear. He was not the only candidate they talked to. The people that believe that it was always Rich Rod and they didn't even really do interviews and it was fake interviews and it was a mirage and they were just always going to hire Rich Rod. That's not the case. That's not what I know to be the case. I do think if Penn State was not in the playoff, not likely maybe advancing again and not going through a journey that may take them to late January, that it might actually be Andy Kotelnicki. But the benefit of Rich Rod, we're now seeing that you have donations, you have McAfee more excited. You do a press conference at the Coliseum. You get him more revved up to maybe have Rich Rod on shows, which can be attractive to recruits, and basically his free media press that Ren Baker keeps talking about that he's giving to the program. You have more alumni excited than ever before that you would have with any other coach. You do, again, have an influx of money, which then can allow you to pluck coaches, and Rich Rod's connections are very vast and very deep, going from West Virginia to Michigan to Arizona to Jack State and Ole Miss and Louisiana Monroe and any of those destinations there from his decades of being a coach throughout college football. So he has the connections there. The journey's not been perfect. He's, had a rough road, and he did leave West Virginia at one point, and he has to apologize for that. He has, and I get there's some fans that'll never get over it, and he's admitted that was a mistake. So I get that issue. If that's why maybe you still hate him, I get it. I was a student then. I get it. It was, there's a lot of things I'd love to do a one-on-one with him, and I have officially requested it. I feel like it's going to happen based on my standing in WVU media. And I'm not going to throw them all cupcakes. I mean, there's some questions I got to ask here, and I'm going to make sure I ask him. Like, I'm not going to do it if it's just Rich Rod, you're great, everything McAfee would ask. I'm not going to do it then because it would be pointless. I think there's things he still has to answer for, and I get fans want to know. But yes, if you're going to get an influx of money, and we're now already seeing some fruits of that labor, then the Rich Rod hire works. He usually does win. He usually can turn things around. Usually it takes a year or two, though. We saw that at West Virginia tenure one, saw that at Arizona, never really worked at Michigan. Took him 3 years to get going, and then they fired him. Jack State, yeah, winning, but it took a minute, and then it explodes. But that's a lower level of football. West Virginia cannot do that. They can't have next year be a 3-8 season like year one during his first tenure. So we'll see. There's pressure to win right now, and there's more pressure than he's felt really ever before. The Pitt game is a must, especially on 9/13. He's already in a must win in his third game back. That's not common for any other coach. But he knows all of that. He's embracing all of that. They're ready to go. And if the more money comes in, it'll help them. The only thing I'm going to push back, George, on all of that is I don't think you can brag to anybody if you were always Rich Rod and say, I told you so just yet, because you have to fix this roster. This roster right now is not good enough. This is not a Big 12 championship roster right now. This roster may not even beat Pitt at home, and I don't think Pitt is any good either. But this roster has some weaknesses. The secondary has not been fixed despite the offers. The defense overall, maybe pass rush rise, I could see trying to improve it, but that's better obviously than the secondary. That's okay at least. The receiving crew needs improved if you don't somehow bring Hudson Clement back and he's still in the portal. The running back room, Jaheim White, can he handle more of a workload? Do you just ascend the freshmen, the recruits that haven't really played at all? You're really depleted there kind of when you've had a very deep running back room, and obviously you're going to want to do a lot of running under Rich Rod, and then there's the whole quarterback conversation. I've said this. I know some are really high on Nico. I don't think Nico's the guy that wins you a Big 12. I don't think so yet. I don't think he fits Rich Rod yet. I know he's won games. He's been more of a game manager. He's not made mistakes. We have not seen really great moments on a regular basis from him, with the exception of the Arizona game. And he did have a really rough go in the brawl win in 2023, even though he did win in her place of Green. He didn't really play well is my issue. I want to see how he plays, but he looked better in practice this past year. We'll see. Another year under his belt, sure. But it's hard for me not to have somebody come in and at least compete with him, even if it's a young kid. And there are some offers out to multiple quarterbacks of that similar ilk that other power programs want too, but may really fit Rich Rod. And maybe if one comes in, Nico leaves, but maybe one of those guys fits more. So we'll see. That's obviously a much bigger deal than even the DC hire, but the DC hire is tremendous news to this point. Do you think Zac Alley can pull WVU players in the portal back to WVU, Gary? It's a good point. I mean, I don't think a defensive coordinator is going to pull a kid back like a Hudson Clement. I cannot imagine a wide receiver, and I know that's the one, just emotionally being a West Virginia kid, seeing him go from walk-on to scholarship and become wide receiver one, even if maybe he really wouldn't be that top guy on a better team. I know that's the one you don't want to lose. He feels like he does kind of feel like hard edge. He feels like he fits Rich Rod and he would like him. But from what I've been told, that meeting didn't go well. And Hudson Clement and his camp didn't really love what was said. I've been told that by multiple sources, including some very, very close to the Hudson Clement family. I'll just say that. So I don't think he's going to be a DC can pull Hudson Clement back. I don't think any offensive players can be pulled back. Obviously, some have already committed. The Day Farmers, some of those offensive linemen have committed. Obviously, Remax following Matt Moore. The offensive line coach, and there's rumors there, but the offensive line position, that's a big deal. And I get someone to keep Matt Moore, maybe even more than Chad Scott and Blaine Stewart. But Moore was such a Brown guy that was likely never going to happen. There's assumptions people are making that he wanted to stay. I don't think that's the case. Virginia Tech was similar job, similar geography. They've been worse recently, but if he can bring his O-line in and kind of what he's doing, he's going to be fine. I don't think that was going to be a thing. And Rick Trickett, he stayed with Clint. Clint got hired as the OC, so he stayed at Jacksonville State. That was initially the plan. I can tell you that. But it's hard to begrudge the guy when he wants to, be there with Clint staying. And maybe they brought in Clint just to get Rick to stay, but whatever the case may be, you can't begrudge him for wanting to stay with Clint. So that didn't happen. But I don't think Matt Moore was realistically ever going to stay. I think that was more of a pipe dream, even though he was a good coach, probably the best assistant under Brown and multiple All-Americans, obviously, in Wyatt Milam and Zach Frazier, even Doug Nestor in the NFL. It's hard to say he was any of the problem. The offensive line was usually always good enough, with the exception of some moments. But, that's a big deal too. But I don't think any of the offensive players are lured back in because of a defensive coordinator hire, even if he's a nice guy and part of recruiting, because they all do dip in to recruiting. And I also don't think he's going to be a major boost in that regard. I don't think he was hired to bring back the transfers from a 6 and 17 guys. I'll say that. He was hired to coordinate the defense on who's ever there, make who's ever there better, whether it be the current roster or more players they bring in. He's there also to help bring in new transfers in the next window, or whoever's there now, and then can actually bring them in and bring them into the fold once this window closes. And you can still sign guys that were in the portal. You just got to enter now. They can do it later. So I think he's there to coordinate the D, make the defense better, bring in players, be a young up-and-coming coach, have the connection with Rich Rod, be that diamond that you're stealing from a Power 4 blue blood, all of that. Maybe it'll help bring some of the guys back. Certainly, probably not the offensive players, but maybe. But I don't think that's the point. I don't think Rich Rod's crying about losing any of the players in the portal. Again, it was a 6 and 17, guys. I know there were some players people didn't want to lose, but this is what happens when you change coaches. And again, they were 6 and 7 if you include the bowl loss, and 6 and 6 if you don't count it because they didn't care. But they did by coming back. They definitely gave a damn. And Hudson Clement had a great game in there. But, Day Farmer was a great coup to get him as a recruit, 100% 4-star receiver. That sucks to lose him. You pluck him from UCF, flip him on National Sign Day, and then a year later, Brown's gone, and now you lose him to UCF again. That does suck. That's a direct thing. He's from Brown. Brown pulled him to leave home, and he goes right back home for similar money, really, with Brown gone. If Brown was still there, maybe he's staying. But you're not going to keep Brown and keep going through the same thing and insanity of a program that's really never on the climb just to keep Day Farmer. So there's been some hits. I do think Kyle Tuner is a hit. That was another top recruit who helped recruit the rest of that class. I talked to him. He was a great force in that recruiting class. Got hurt. We didn't fully get to see him. He's a young up-and-coming O-line. He's a guy that you could have for 4 years and anchor it. And he comes from the Good Counsel, that great high school in Ohio. He comes from that pipeline. We're in Maryland. But I just don't see him coming back either. Maybe he's going to follow Matt Moore. And those are young recruits that are hits for sure. But I don't know if Zac Alley does anything to necessarily bring them. But nonetheless, I think it's a big deal to have him for sure. Let's see what else goes here in the chat. This is the huge hire. The Oklahoma podcasts are literally pulling their hair out right now. And I got to say, it's enjoyable to see. I have seen that. So, by the way, there's a lot of Oklahoma fans out there that are trying to argue, no big deal. You know, this isn't why players go anywhere for a DC. And by the way, the assistant coaches are big deals. They go maybe for the head coach, they go for the staff overall, and obviously the money. And Oklahoma can pay, even though they haven't been winning recently. But they want that relationship with the staff and a young coach who's close in age. They just hired him. They wouldn't have hired him if they didn't like him. So, yeah, Oklahoma fans are mad, and I get it. It's a better program than West Virginia. It's not, maybe now you could argue whether it's lateral, but there's more money in its SEC, and they could pop at any moment. So you still figure it's better, despite similar seasons in 2024. But it just shows you their reaction on how big of a coup this really is. Because they're going to tell you they don't care, and it's not a big deal, while they're melting down. So if you're melting down, it's a big deal to you. If you don't care, and it's you're about to fire him anyway, like some are trying to suggest, which is not true at all, then you wouldn't care. They weren't unloading him. They liked him. They just freaking hired him recently. He's young. They wanted to keep him, and the defense was better than it's been in recent years, even though the team wasn't better. Offense was an issue as well. They didn't get over. They got 20 points in a bowl game, like that. Again, they cared. They do care, and you're seeing that as they're melting down. All coaches leave, not just Rich Rod. Money is why we all have a job. I'm over that being the. I'm over that. Okay, Ali, just same thing to OU. Yeah, I mean, George. Again, I've been saying that for years. That is the mature thing. The only thing I'm going to ask you, if you're still here after leaving that comment, yeah. Rich Rod left for a better job. Sure. I don't think it excuses the way he left. I know some dirty things that went on there, and he didn't need to leave as dirty as he left, but he did leave. It was a job. It's a business. Coaches leave. I get it 100%. And Allie's doing that to Oklahoma when they wanted to keep him longer. They did just recently hire him, gave him a big job, biggest job of his career and opportunity, and he's going to bounce. That sucks for them. That sucks for their recruiting. They're going to lose players probably in the portal now, even though it's not a window thing because it's not a head coach. I get that too. But my question is, there's people out there saying once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer isn't a thing anymore if you don't finish and at least graduate. Okay. But once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer still applies for Rich Rod, who left for a better job or what he thought was a better job at the time. And now he's back. And yes, he had to atone for his sins, but it took a long time. And now he's back, and he's always a Mountaineer all over again. And if they do win a Big 12, revive for National Crown again, or have the Cinderella Disney movie and, have this right off into the sunset. By the way, if he's losing, he'll get fired. I don't think Ren Raker is just going to let him do it ceremonially. They have to win. He has pressure. But if he has success, then he's going to be paraded right up there with Don Nalen and once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer all over again for a West Virginia native, for a WVU guy, for a former player who then did it big as a coach. And now doing another tenure. So why doesn't that apply to players then? This is a job to the players now. I mean, I know some of the numbers Hudson Clement is getting from major brands, from SEC schools in particular. It's more than what WVU wants to pay him. Not that there's more money in there now, but they don't view him as somebody just throw cash around. So if he's going to get more money elsewhere, whether you think that's good for him playing time, like some of those schools I keep hearing, I don't think he's a wide receiver one there either. But if they say he is and he thinks he is, okay. But if he's going to get more money, why not? And really, guys, if you're in a job, this is a perfect analogy. I've had somebody say this to me on another show I do. I brought this up to others. Every time this is discussed, I'm either saying it or somebody else is saying it in conversation because this is the perfect analogy. If you're in a job and your mentor, the guy that hired you, the woman that hired you, whoever that hired you, your boss that you really like and you like working for and has created that environment that you are happy at work, gets fired, gets removed, maybe quits, maybe takes another position, maybe the Rich Rod thing 17 years ago, but let's just say fire to compare it to Neil Brown right now. Wouldn't it make you think again about loving being there? Wouldn't it make you think again about your situation? Wouldn't it make you wonder who this new person's going to be that you don't have a relationship with? These players have no relationship with Rich Rod. They didn't grow up necessarily all Mountaineer fans way back, and he wasn't a coach there, obviously, for almost 2 decades. while they were kids, while they were babies in 2007, really, when you think about how long ago that was and how old we all feel now. So this new guy comes in, a totally different atmosphere, totally different vibe, totally different personality. And yeah, the success might be better. It might be a better situation overall. But if you're that kid, why do you want to have to prove yourself all over again to a guy that's kind of a jerk in your eyes, who is totally different, that you may not fit into the system, that didn't recruit you, that you have no relationship with, that you think people that he did recruit he's going to like more, that he will guarantee nothing to you. And now you're hearing from other jobs, from other employers, from people with a similar structure or better, offering you more money or offering you money in general, even if you want to argue that it's equal because WVU's NIL is now even better than it was under Brown. Why would you not think about it? Why would you not test the waters? Why would you not maybe leave? Okay. If you're in a job and your boss is fired and then you're offered a better situation, you're unsure about your situation, you like it at your current place, now less without your boss that you love so much, and maybe you get more money elsewhere, you're gonna take that other job. You're gonna take that other job. You're gonna at least test the waters. That's a similar situation. That's a similar situation to the players. So if the coach is always a Mountaineer and you're forgiving the coach and you're cool with coaches doing it and you have no problem with Zac Alley screwing over Oklahoma because it's benefiting you, the WVU fan, then how could you be against the players leaving? That's hypocritical. That's where I am, guys. That's hypocritical. So I get it. Yeah, people should have, maybe you could argue, George, people should have got over it years ago. There should be no problem with Rich Rod now if the program wins. He did apologize. Let's get over it. Let's not cry over 17 years ago. I hear all of that. Let's be mature adults. I hear all of that. Why can't you apply it to the players? If it's a job for him and it was a job then, why isn't it a job now? Why don't the players get the respect of it being a job for them? Because it is. It is. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be, but there's a reason why players linger for NIL deals if they aren't really NFL players. There's a reason why, everyone was making money before on Front Street and it was always under the radar what players were doing behind closed doors. And yeah, some were getting paid in the past illegally, but everyone's getting more now, and it's much more on Front Street. It's much more right out there, and they're just getting paid for pure capitalism. It's their name, image, and likeness, what they are worth. There's no, socialism, $300 for everybody, whether you're good, bad, or indifferent. Star gets the same as the worst player. That's not the case. Like that would be unfair almost in a way to the star. It's what your name, image, and likeness commands. And why stay in a job for less money with a guy that you don't know when the guy that brought you in is fired and now you're in uncertainty? Why not test the waters? It's similar. Apply it to your own life. Derek, I got turned down by a girl 17 years ago, and I'm over them. Maybe I should get over Rich Rod. Yeah, Derek, I think that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, we've all been through the ringer in the past with girls who rejected us, and then you end up in a better relationship. You end up married with kids, and you don't think about 17 years ago and a girl that you liked that rejected you. Maybe did it rudely. Maybe you got ghosted. Get over it. Your life's good right now, and I know you're married and your lovely wife, I'm sure. Wouldn't appreciate you pining over 17 years ago. So there's maybe that's part of it too. I mean, it's almost ridiculous how long ago that was. I feel freaking really old. And Richard kind of looks good actually for his age when you think about it. I mean, obviously he doesn't look like he did in his 40s to now in his 60s, but I mean, he doesn't look like he's Santa Claus. For example, for the holiday season. I hope Zac Alley brings some defensive players with him from Oklahoma. Maybe that could happen. See, when you have a coordinator that you're plucking, you certainly can pluck some of the players too. You would figure, but we'll see. Because again, I think the spring portal is going to be more active for West Virginia in terms of success. Obviously, a lot of departures now. I think you're going to see less departures. Maybe you'll see some with players not loving the spring session. Rich Rod's going to work their ass off in spring, so maybe some would leave because it's just too much work. That's going to be a thing, 100%. And McAfee's talked about that if that's why you're leaving, then no big deal. You're not going to win anyway if you're malcontent there. So sure, you're going to have players that are going to go through spring, maybe even players you like that are going to go through spring, and they're going to find out hard edge is rougher than what they've been dealing with, and then they're going to leave. And that's why there's the second window. So you don't have to, just because you lose a starting job. It could be because someone else pays you. It could be because of collusion. It could be because you're sick of hard edge and maybe you're soft. 100%. That could be all, or maybe you get plucked. You're going to have another window of chaos. It will happen. They will lose some, but they also should be able to get in and have more success getting them when you have a Zac Alley aboard, when you have your staff fully in place, when you've made these damn announcements, and we're not all just reporting and going off Thamel or whoever else or our own sources, and you then have some work put in. Okay, and Rich Rod's seen them on the field because there's something else that goes on in the transfer portal that I think everyone needs to get. And I think everyone does now, but I keep reiterating it. When you see a player bounce in the portal, it's not 100% of the time that they're screwing somebody over. They could easily have had a meeting with the coach, and this happened even under Brown. I know for a fact this happened under Brown. I know for a fact there were players that Brown did this to. And yeah, Brown wasn't having the success that you dream of with Rich Rod, even the 9-win year being the best and only a couple bowl wins. But Brown was even telling players, hey, it's in your best interest and my best interest if you transfer. Coaches around the country use the portal often as like an NFL release system where they tell you, hey, it's best you go in the portal because, otherwise it would screw us scholarship wise, but we're not going to play you. We don't, want you here anymore, basically. And I think you should bounce. It'll help us. It'll help you. Otherwise, you're going to sit here. We're going to be pissed that you're still here. It's going to screw up our scholarship dynamic, and we're not going to play anymore because now we're mad at you for whatever reason. And I'm not saying that they hated everybody they did that to and they were dicks. I'm sure they weren't. Brown was obviously a very nice guy. But it happened. There were players that that told me, that ended up leaving, that said, like, the coach told me to leave. It wasn't because I wanted to go. Like, I wrote about it on the site. Cortez Bram is one. He was locked out of the facility. And yeah, maybe he kind of wanted to go leave before a little bit. He told the coach he was thinking about it. And then once he told the coach he was thinking about it, he was told directly, you're thinking about it, get the hell out. And then he wasn't even able to get back in the facility the next day and was locked the hell out when he still had stuff there. So that's a hard edge move, I guess, that was weird that they did do against him. But those things go on. So there's also going to be players throughout the spring. The point of what I'm getting at here is Rich Rod's going to evaluate as well. He's going to go through spring with these players, getting practices with these players, much more evaluation then than obviously doing now, just off of watching prior film under a different coaching staff on a bad team, and then sitting around now maybe talking via text or on Zoom. He'll evaluate them through Law School Hill, through the spring session, through his training sessions, through his practices, through the hard edge that he's going to put them through in that camp. And then he'll absolutely tell some of those kids, I liked you before, I don't like you now. I think it's best you go. I'm going to go try to replace you. Those conversations will happen. Or he'll tell them, you're no longer where you were on the depth chart with me. Sorry, Brown thought this of you. I think this of you, and it's less. Those conversations will happen. Maybe there's some players he thinks he can elevate that Brown didn't have success with. That might be a thing too. So we will see, but there's a lot more of this journey before we even get to the summer, certainly before we get to the season. Do you see the juiced up Pop-Tart today rip off this rapper like Hulk Hogan, let's go Mountaineers? I did. The Pop-Tart Bowl is fantastic. And if the Mountaineers can never actually get to a Big 12 title level and actually get in the CFP, I do hope at some point they're in the Pop-Tart Bowl, and I absolutely will go down there and cover it. And that is a weird, random bowl game that, even though you could argue against all the bowl games now with the playoff, and I don't think they're ever going to fully go away because of money, and the Pop-Tart Bowl on this Saturday night is going to be better ratings than anything else that could go on. So the networks are still going to want them. There's still money there. But you don't need as many bowls. But the one bowl you should be keeping under all scenarios, protect at all costs, the Pop-Tart Bowl. So, yes, I did. I also saw Miami's mascot try to eat a Pop-Tart after hitting a girl and shooting his shot against a Syracuse reporter weeks earlier in their loss, obviously, that kind of squandered their CFP opportunities. And the Pop-Tart Bowl is just freaking fantastic. I will say s'mores, hot fudge sundae, even old school cherry. Could throw some strawberry in there. Different options for sure can be great Pop-Tart wise, but those are my, I believe that's the Mount Rushmore for me. I could maybe be interchangeable, but s'more always got to be there. So s'more, and people throw apple cinnamon, people throw other type of cinnamon in there. I'm going to definitely tell you that s'more is an elite Pop-Tart, maybe the GOAT, and always in that Mount Rushmore, but those are some of my favorites. I haven't had a Pop-Tart in a long damn time, though, guys. Got to say. Very unhealthy meal, but it's been a long time since I've had a Pop-Tart. What's your case for WVU next year? Mine is 10 wins, 8 floor. I'm assuming you're asking, like, what's my prediction? I don't even feel comfortable doing that right now. We're in December 28th here, guys. We just had Christmas. I literally just told you, I don't know, what this roster is really going to look like come summer, because you got to worry about the spring portal more than now. They're still trying to bring back some of these players. Some players are still in the portal. These West Virginia players have till January 1. Guys, 30-day window because they had a coaching change. It's not over now. Not over this weekend. They have till January 1. They got a few more days. So don't sit back. Don't sit back. By the time you listen to this, Jaheim could be in that portal. And I do think he's absolutely somebody that Rich Rod wants. He does see a lot of Steve Slayton in him. That was what Jaheim was kind of doing his freshman year, and that is part of bringing Chad Scott back. But things can all go awry. Rodney Gallagher, I always thought, was going to go in that portal. He's not popped there yet. We got a few more days. They got a 30-day window. So I'm not giving you a win-loss prediction on the 2025 season before even the 30-day window is freaking up that you guys are going to then hold me to, 7 months from now. If I have to give it to you this way, I will. The hype that's on Rich Rod, who Rich Rod is, the pressure that's there, the polarization of the hire, and normally you would never expect so much from year one. He obviously had to take that 3-8 journey in year one before, but this is a different era. This is now a transfer portal era. Indiana did turn it around. You could argue whether their schedule helped them, and I've argued that, and they didn't really beat anybody, but they won a lot of games, and they were in the CFP. SMU, first year as a Power 4, same deal. They're in. You can turn it around real fast in this era. Kirstenegger is older coach. Indiana had 3 bowl wins their entire program history before the 2024 season. They ended up in the CFP. Okay, West Virginia is top 25 in terms of conference titles. They have 41 bowl appearances, guys. Indiana has 3 bowl wins, 41 bowl appearances for the Mountaineers. Okay, it's a different ball game historically. So if Indiana can turn it around and go in the CFP right away, and Indiana, we're talking a few more bowl appearances, by the way, not even close. So should West Virginia. If Iowa State can contend in the Big 12 in this era, so should West Virginia. If BYU can, so should West Virginia. If you can Colorado went from 1-11 to 2 years later. Yeah, Deion's part of that with that pizzazz. 2 years later, they're in a solid bowl game, and they were in the Big 12 title race towards the end of the season with the Heisman winner, even though you're not necessarily expecting that at West Virginia. So what I'm trying to say is, in that press conference, that pep rally, him talking about 13-9 directly, him saying he can win a national title at West Virginia, McAfee having him on once a week, that's going to happen during the season, all the alumni back, the more money there, all the hype, the commentary that you guys are putting forth on social media, it can't be 6-6 again. It can't be 6-6 again. Cannot. You lose the Pitt game and you're 6-6. It's a colossal failure. And it's only year one, and they're not going to fire him after 1 year. But there's room in the contract to have another talk after 2, after 3 years. And this is not Don Nalen coming back or Joe Gibbs with Washington in the NFL, and you just got to let it linger, and you're worried about firing the legend. Rand Baker has no personal ties. He did talk to Kotonicki. He did talk to almost 20 coaches. He landed on Rich Rod. He likes to hire Rich Rod. The money's part of it. I don't think he's lying. I think he's fully sold in on Rich Rod winning. And I think the hire makes tons of sense based on what we're seeing right now. But they can't lose. There's tons of pressure. Rich Rod hasn't had this pressure since Michigan. And I would say that if they don't win 7-8 games, I'm not expecting CFP year one. That would be a little nuts. Necessarily, or even a Big 12 title in year one. That'd be a little nuts. Maybe year 2 is where you more look to that, because then they have a full off season to recruit, and you don't got to worry about this December chaos. You hope there's not all the exits that you're seeing right now. But it can't be 6-6 again. And you're going to have an easier schedule with RMU in week 1 when Brown had all those Power 4s and Penn State back-to-back years and the brawl before that and Maryland. Like, you're going to have RMU, Robert Morris. It's in Pittsburgh. You're going to beat them. They're an FCS. Neil Brown would win that game. Then you're going to have Ohio. It is on the road because you have a home and home, but that's a group of 5. They were just good, but you got to beat them. And then you have the brawl, but it's at home despite 9-13. It's at home on 9-13. But you're not going to have to see 13-9 in the stadium because you're at home. So you likely should win that. And then you're 3-0, and then you're talking about getting ranked, which you didn't get done during the Brown era, at least not in the AP poll, and you got that one in the coaches poll the coaches always talked about, but that's nothing to really brag about. So you really get in there, and then you get into conference play. And conference play matters more than even the brawl does factually because of this era with the CFP rules. But I would say, honestly, you got to win 7, maybe 8 games, including the bowl. You probably need to win 8 games overall and then 9, including the bowl, if you're not worrying about the CFP really in year one, even though Indiana did that with Cignetti in year one. You got to quickly turn this around. There is pressure now. You can't do 3-8 in year one. You can't even do 6-6. That would be a failure based on this hype. So I'm not going to give you my prediction. I got to see more from the roster, but I mean, that's really where it is. If I'm out there, if I'm telling you in July, I think this is a 6-6 team, I'm telling you they really screwed this up. It's going to be a real bad year. It's going to be polarized with the fans again. You're going to go into the next year with people, already wanting Rich Rod's head. That's what it would end up being if you're 6-6 or worse in year one. People that are welcoming him back now that are taking his apology would probably turn right again, and maybe they'd give it 2 years, but I'll tell you, I mean, if they're not taking a jump from what Brown was within this 3-year window, I think Wren absolutely would fire him. I don't think you're getting to the 5 years. So if you haven't mentioned it yet, can you talk about the CJ Donaldson transfer and why would Gallagher leave? So as we're speaking here, Rodney Gallagher has not left. He is not even in the portal. I thought he'd be a player that would enter the portal. So far, I've been wrong on that. He has not entered the portal yet. As I cautioned everybody, he has until January 1. We are December 28th as we're talking right now on this live show. So again, if you're listening to this pod, I will put it out audio as a pod afterwards. It's a live chat. So if you're sitting there January 1 or January 2nd saying he never entered, Mike, you're an idiot. I hear you. Or if he already did enter, you don't want to hear this, turn it off. I'm not predicting it either. Okay. I thought he would. And the reason why is, and I do have a lot of close sources there with the Gallagher camp. I feel like I've recruited, covered the recruitment of him pretty much more and maybe better than anybody. I'm going to say that because I'm obviously attached to Pittsburgh. He was a Whitfield kid and covering WVU. I really got them on lock, know the family, sat next to the family, going down the UCF game. I have, a little bit of being in there. Granted, they've been mad at me at times as well. So I can't say I'm, the Gallagher whisperer by any means, but I think I'm as tapped in as anybody. I think I've covered him the longest of anyone in WVU media and probably have covered him on both sides of it, even from back in high school to now. And I thought he'd enter the portal because at the end of the 2022 season, when he was still a recruit, he put this out. At the time, I was just sourcing it because he hadn't put it out yet, but he's put it out, so I can say this now. He would have absolutely decommitted and flipped to Penn State if Neil Brown was fired then. 100%, 100%. There's the reason why I was saying it then. I'm going to stand by it now. Neil Brown was not fired. Some say he should have been. He was not. They ended up having a 9-win year. Gallagher still came aboard. He did not. If you remember, he was even going to a Penn State game and taking a visit there a week before signing day. And there were really some concerns because he also wasn't talking to us in media. That was a good 2 weeks where he was shutting it down. People thought he would jump. So he did not. He came back to the Mountaineer family where he never, I guess, left. And he ended up on West Virginia, played the freshman year. They won the Mayo Bowl. They won 9 games. He was used sparingly. He had that moment against Duquesne, almost a blunder. He had an improvement. He was changing positions as a full-time receiver. That's not fully what he did in high school. Played in quarterback there. Was the most athletic guy in the field in all those games. So it's a different thing than at WVU in the Big 12. And he showed signs of improvement. Bilal Marshall always talked about that too for a coaching perspective. But he was still far from being a top receiver in the Power Four. So even at that time, even when everything was fine and Brown was still around and they just won, I thought there was a glimmer of a 10% chance even that maybe he would leave and go to a group of 5 level or try to get more playing time. But he stayed. And in all reality, I thought he would stay. He stayed. He really showed improvement this past season, even if the numbers didn't say that. In practice and in games, he's much more of a receiver now. He's a player that you definitely want to keep and I think would flourish in a Rich Rod offense. I don't think he's a wide receiver 1, but I think he would definitely flourish. Maybe he'd be the punt return guy. I think he was going to be that under Brown anyway, and there was talk of that he'd replace Preston Fox anyway. He's a young player with multiple years of eligibility. You want to keep him. I do think they want to keep him, 100%. I don't think they're going to break the bank for the man, but I don't think his value is what it was out of high school either because he hasn't played as much. And I think him and his family know that. But I know he was going to almost flip to Penn State at one point if Brown was fired. Brown has now been fired. He's always been a Neil Brown guy. That family loved Neil Brown. They love Neil Brown more than they love Pat Narduzzi or Franklin or any of those coaches trying to recruit him because Pat Narduzzi wanted him. He can say he didn't care. Pitt fans can say he didn't care. They wanted him. They recruited him hard, and they didn't like the meetings. They didn't like what Narduzzi would say. They didn't like what he was selling. A lot of conversations were against West Virginia, why you shouldn't go there, why you shouldn't go to Penn State versus why you should come to Pitt. And it turned them off. And he ended up always being that West Virginia guy. But he really was staying true to Brown. Again, you go for money, you go for coaching staff. Maybe you got an affinity for a school, but his family has connections at Pitt. His sister went to Pitt. It wasn't like they hated him. So it was a lot for Brown. And he was a 4-star. It was a big recruit for Neil Brown. That's the top recruit of the Neil Brown era for sure. And one of the top recruits in the last 30 years, really. I mean, that's like up there with Noah Devine in terms of the hype coming in. It's not lived up to that yet, but there's still time. But he's flirted with Penn State before, and Brown's now been fired. So he's been the most attached to Brown. Him and Jaheim were really attached to Brown, and they were attached to each other. And especially with Traylon Ray going in the portal, because Ray, Gallagher, Jaheim, they're close friends. I thought they would stay together. I do think Ray is really attractive to Power 4 schools out there, though, for his talent, despite recovering off of an injury. So I'm just concerned about it, guys. That's all I'm saying. There's still a couple days left. He may stay. I would have thought he already would have been in, so I think that's maybe why it's not going to happen now. If he was going to go in, I would have thought it would have been earlier. I was even hearing from people that it was going to happen right after the bowl game. He is still not entered, so maybe it won't happen. But I would never be shocked if any player who was attached to Brown enters the portal, good, bad, or indifferent. I would certainly not be shocked if it is Gallagher. I wouldn't even be shocked if it's Jaheim White. I would just not be shocked. I think people need to stop being shocked. That's what happens when you go through a coaching change. And I do think, even though Penn State's really good and they're still in the playoff, obviously, their one weakness, I covered their CFP game for Yardbarker nationally, is still they don't have a top receiver. Aller's doing it without a top receiver. They haven't had that really in years. They never had the Martin Harrison that Ohio State had, even in the Big Ten. That would put them over the limit. And they haven't been able to get to the Michigan-Ohio State level when Michigan's normally good, besides this year, without that receiver. We'll see how this year ends for them. Maybe they win the national title, but they still want to fix the receiver room. And he would be a cheap, still top recruit, tons of talent. They recruited him before. He'd still want to go there. He still does like Franklin. He still has relationships there, but I would not be shocked. If he does go in the portal, I do think he's looking at Penn State, but maybe he'll go group of 5 and want to play right away and get to a higher position. Maybe he doesn't want to do the hard edge thing with Rich Rod in the spring. Maybe he wants to wait and see how it is. Maybe Jaheim wants to wait and see how it is. Maybe Chad Scott's telling them, wait and see how it is, because there's a spring portal. But I just wouldn't be surprised. That's all I'm saying. Can you talk about CJ Donaldson's transfer? I mean, I don't know what you mean in terms of can I talk about it? Yeah, he committed to transfer to Ohio State. So I think CJ Donaldson is a solid back. I think he's a workhorse back. I think he's a muscle back. I think you saw that in the Frisco Bowl. I think he would have really fit well with Rich Rod. I think Rich Rod would love to have a dynamic, a two-headed monster of CJ and Jaheim White. I think both those running backs would fit with Rich Rod. I do think he has some hard edge to him, but I also think CJ's a little bit sensitive, I mean, there was a run and a skid, not this past season, but the year before, so 2023, the good year for the program. He didn't have as great of a year as some would have thought entering. He kind of lost that starting job to Jaheim, even though they were 1-2. He regressed a little bit overall numbers-wise from the year before when he caught everybody off guard. And I get they were stacking the box, which fans came at me for, but he averaged 3 yards, 2.8, and 3.2, 3 straight weeks. He had the brawl game, but he really wasn't dominant. So he was getting criticized by some in media, including myself. And then you hear through the grapevine from people in his camp, from the program defending him, from different people, not from him directly, I will say, that he's upset about it, that he doesn't like it. That type of stuff I don't think is going to fly into Rich Rod. That type of stuff I don't think is going to fly in Columbus. So I do think if I'm him, go after the money. Okay, they're paying you. They're probably paying you more. They obviously got more no matter what's coming into West Virginia. They got more, $20 million last year for their roster, even though losing to Michigan. They're going to have more coming in probably this year because their fans are even angered. They want to get another national title. I get it. So there's more. He probably is getting more money. The worst guy on the roster there is still going to get a chunk of change. He's probably getting more money there. I don't know exactly what he's getting. He's probably getting more money. It's not too much farther away geographically. You're in the Big Ten. Maybe he fits as that muscle rock fight back. He's more of the Thunder, Jaheim's Lightning. He's the physical bruiser. He was a tight end. Okay, he's still only a couple years into the position. Maybe he fits the Big Ten better. I would imagine he's not going to nearly be the number one back. I would imagine he's going to have less playing time and less touches than he had at West Virginia. I would think that he's going to be maybe dealing with a harsher media situation than at WVU in Columbus. I would imagine that if he has 3 yards, 2.8, and 3.2 yards per carry on an average, several straight weeks, especially if they don't win all those games, he's going to get criticized. He's not going to then get as many touches. He's going to lose his top back status. The coaching staff will go off of him, and the media will never apologize for anything they say because it's freaking Columbus and it's college football in the Big Ten at Ohio State. So I think he's going to eventually regret the decision. He maybe could transfer again because he has, more time there. Who knows? Maybe he'll do the grad thing. I think for his personal career on the field, it would have been better to stay with WVU with Rich Rod. I think he maybe could even be the number one over Jaheim with Rich Rod. I think Rich Rod would have liked him. Maybe even a similar school. Maybe, transfer to Kansas State, something like that. But going to Ohio State, I think he'll get lost in the shuffle there. I don't think he'll be the top back. I don't think it's better for his career on the field. And I do think personality-wise, he will get upset with that media circuit, and they will not give a damn. So I think it might not be good for him, but he is going to get more money, I would imagine. So if he wants to go for the money, more power to him. Again, as I said, we'd all, probably take a different job for more money. Certainly if you're doing the same type of thing, but for more money. But I don't think on the field he's going to be a one there. And I think he's going to be dealing with a lot that he wasn't dealing with at West Virginia, that he didn't already like at West Virginia. Again, if he starts sucking at Ohio State, they're not going to put up with it. And if his camp didn't like what I was writing, they're really going to have some problems. That's all I'm going to say. But he's a great kid. I didn't hear anything from him that was negative. He always answered my questions. He always was nice to me personally. I think he's a fun-loving kid. I think he did work his ass off, and he stayed mature and humble whenever he lost that one spot to Jaheim. He fought, he clawed, he still was a solid back. He ended up being that number one in that bowl game. He kind of clearly was the one with Jaheim hurt, and he muscled them for that comeback that almost happened. So give him tons of credit there, but he's going for money. I don't think it's best for his career, and I do think he's kind of sensitive. I mean, that's going to be my mental analysis. You can say whatever he wants about me personally, too. I'm sure, there's things to criticize me, but that fishbowl in Columbus is going to be rougher waters if he struggles there than even at WVU. Are we getting any more offensive line players? I don't know what you mean to Tech. From Tech. Are we losing any more? Okay, I read that better. Are we losing any more to Virginia Tech, obviously? Anyone that was under Matt Moore, I would imagine is full head of steam possible to Virginia Tech. Obviously, Johnny Williams went to Missouri. I thought that would have been a young player that Matt Moore would have wanted. I don't know any more directly right now that I can immediately say are going to 100% go to with Matt Moore. But when you have your position coach go to a similar program, it's all up in the air for everyone to go. I was not at all surprised by Remack. You're not going to – I don't think he wanted to stay. I don't think that was an option. That's not Rich Rod's guy. That was Brown's guy. But still, you're going to lose players, and if they go there, nothing would be shocking. Yeah, Brian, I mean, that's what it is. He's taking more money. I think he potentially could get lost in the shuffle there, so it's less exposure. If he's the number 3 back and he's not getting any carries and gets 3 carries a game, even if they're in the Big Ten title game, that's not really more exposure for you personally, even if it's great exposure for the program, versus getting 30 carries or 20 carries or 25 or 15 even when he was splitting with Jaheim on ESPN in a less of a spotlight game, but you're still on national TV for WVU and you're in the Power 4. And if you win it, you're in the playoff then. I mean, Ohio State's going to likely be in the playoff again. They might get in every year even if they don't win the Big Ten. We've seen that. But if you're not the 1 and you're not even the 2 and you're 3rd or 4th, or maybe you're not thinking at all, yeah, is that better for you personally? I don't think so, but he's getting more money. And I don't know if he's going to run out of gas. He's shown that he really has a high motor, but still. I'm going to wrap this up soon, by the way, guys. And again, I do apologize again for any of the archive podcast listeners because it's a live chat. A lot of chat action here. I thought there would kind of be. That's why I did this. I was home on a Saturday night, so maybe I'm a loser, but I wanted to fire this up off the breaking news. Daughter's asleep. You guys are here too, so maybe you're on your phones at a bar as I'm clearly home with my Snoop Dogg White Elephant gift. Snoop on a stoop. He's having a good time, so if any of you are, congrats. Snoop on a stoop there. The greatest white elephant gift of all time is this. Snoop on a stoop. I wish I had my mind on my money and my money on my mind like Snoop Dogg does. And I also wish I was sipping on some gin and juice like Snoop Dogg. But right now, he's laid back. He's enjoying himself. This is now going to be behind me all the time. So I know you're jealous about that. That was a white elephant gift from the family, from someone in the family, and I am always about that. Doesn't have the speed to play at Ohio State. Again, I don't think he's going to be a top back there. I think he will get lost in the shuffle, and I don't think it's better for his individual career on the field, but he got more money. And if it works out, then fantastic. I'm not rooting against the kid. I hope it works out. I'm going to hit this. Who would have transferred even if Brown wasn't fired? So I'll hit this and then something else, and then we'll wrap it up. I think it's an interesting question. I will guarantee you this. It would not have been the same amount of players. I do think it'd be less players, not only overall, but less in terms of starters. I don't think Remack would have left because I think Matt Moore would have obviously stayed there. I think that was directly part of it. I think maybe even Johnny Williams, like those young offensive linemen, would have stayed, likely because Matt Moore would have stayed. I do think Hudson Clement likely would have stayed anyway. Maybe he'd test it, but I think he probably would have stayed. At least he would have came back if he entered, because that's a thing. Obviously, you can enter and come back. I think Day Farmer may have left anyway. I think CJ probably would have left anyway. Honestly, I think he was kind of getting sick of the split thing. I think he was sick of the fishbowl at WVU. I think he was upset about some media coverage. I already told you. I do think he might have left anyway. I don't know where he would have, Ohio State, again, it was for the money. I don't think it's best for playing time. I do think he would have left anyway. If you give me a list, maybe I'll go through it all. But you would have, no matter what, every year you're going to lose players. But after 2023, going into 2024, and it was obviously a worse year than the year before, they lost players. Everyone will, but they were mostly depth pieces. So after the 9-win year, people were excited and quickly saying, hey, I'm going to come back and re-up with Country Road Trust. They got more money to come back. Garrett Green and company. They got paid more, because that's a thing too. You got to get paid more to even come back, or else then you would leave. They would have still lost some. I don't think it would have been as many starters. I don't think it would have been as often. I don't think even maybe some of those players that would have, maybe the depth guys who wouldn't play, who still wouldn't ascend, would go like it was the year before. But a Remack who would become maybe the anchor, I don't think he would have left as long as Matt Moore was still there, and Brown wasn't going to fire Matt Moore. Obviously, associate head coach and next in line, really, and besides Scott and his boy for years, and really the best assistant on the staff, you could argue, in terms of what he accomplished. So that's an interesting thing. Maybe I'll look at that and do that type of piece at some point in the offseason when all this damn news calms down. Clement, as we're speaking now, wouldn't be shocked if he leaves, know about the money he's being offered, and would not be shocked at all if he leaves. I don't think, like CJ, it's necessarily best for him on the field, because I think he could get lost in the shuffle. I don't think he's a one at those programs either. I think he fits Rich Rod, though, so we'll see. It can happen. Think the common thing to a lot of those guys who have stayed would have severely downgraded, considering none of these guys ever performed. I mean, I'm not going to say none of the players in the portal performed. Obviously, Hudson Clement performed. Obviously, CJ performed. Traylon Ray was a freaking stud, and he performed. I mean, that's an exaggeration. The team wasn't good. They weren't good enough. You can blame Brown if you want, and he got fired, and he deserved to be fired. But to act like all these players in the portal are just trash is just crazy. And I know there's some fans that go in that direction because they're just upset at them. But so the ones that stayed, you tell me the players that are on this team now. I mean, Gallagher, I don't think it's fair to say Gallagher hasn't performed. Gallagher was changing positions. Neil Brown said when he recruited him, I'm not expecting much of him right away. The fans were expecting a lot, but nobody else was. The media and Brown was saying, do not expect a lot. He was changing positions. He was too freaking small. He had to build up his body. I think he definitely can perform next year, certainly even more so under Rich Rod. Jaheim so far stayed. He's been performing. Jaheim's somebody who performed and is still staying. It's not like everyone's bad that is coming back, but there are players that Rich Rod's going to say to them in the spring, you want to stay, but I don't want you. That's going to be a thing. That's why you can't ask me to predict the record right now. It's way too damn early. But Jaheim is for sure a player, as we're recording this, who's not in the portal, that is a good player that has produced. And I think Gallagher is not fair to say he hasn't produced, because he was changing positions. Next year, if he doesn't get numbers, then sure. But we'll see where he is, and certainly see where he is on the depth chart. And the secondary was just all kinds of bad. So they needed to all go. I think maybe that would have been scrapped even with Brown. I think that would have been. I'll answer that question. I think that's the one position. Go to the secondary. That position would have got scrapped even with Brown. And obviously the biggest loss of the portal, which I didn't even mention. It can't believe I went this long without talking. Josiah Trotter. Like, Jay, you cannot tell me Josiah Trotter. Cannot tell me. I don't know what question you want answered here, man. You cannot tell me Josiah Trotter was not a productive player. He didn't stay. But maybe he would have with Brown. Maybe he wouldn't have. Maybe he would have got an NIL bag. But again, that's a big loss. That's probably the biggest loss, even more than Traylon Ray. That's the big loss. But again, Jaheim White's a player that stayed, that is produced. That's the one player that I think fits with Rod, that Rod will see some little Steve Slayton in, that'll want to keep, that was a dominant in the rough recruit under Brown, that has produced and has so far stayed. That would be a great keep and a great add, kind of, for Rich Rod, that was an incumbent player. But I don't think there's any player that you should freak out about leaving off a 6 and 7 team. Josiah Trotter, Traylon Ray, Hudson Clement, these are really good players you want to keep. But you know that you can lose them when you change coaches, and you're not going to keep a coach just to keep a few players that are good. No, I agree with you there. Like, Brown had to go. I think Brown's a great guy, but he had to go. I think he's happy to be gone too. I think peace of mind wise. And you can't, the Rich Rod vibe is obviously very, very different. It's not going to fit everybody. You can't keep a coach just to keep Hudson Clement, Traylon Ray, and Josiah Trotter. Would they have left anyway? You got to ask them. I think Josiah Trotter probably would have left anyway with NFL looks and probably people in his ear and NIL money out there. I think Traylon Ray maybe would have stayed, especially recovering from an injury. I think Hudson Clement definitely probably would have stayed, but who knows with the money that he's being offered. I think Gallagher definitely would stay, but we don't know still. And right now he's not in the portal. And the secondary, it didn't matter because it's a lot of the transfers too. We'll see. I also do appreciate the questions. I also do appreciate the action there. So, Jay, I do appreciate that. Thank you for the compliment there. This is good stuff. Thank you for answering questions. Again, I give you the answers that I know right now. Obviously, more news may come out when you listen to this tomorrow, for anybody listening to this archive, or when you click around sites tomorrow. And this is obviously a fast-moving wheel here that I'm doing a show on a Saturday night because we now have a national report to confirm what a lot of us have been saying about the defensive coordinator. And I do think Zac Alley is a big get as a young up-and-coming DC, that you are stealing a guy from the same job at a Power 4, not only a Power 4, but a freaking blue blood out of the SEC. And yeah, there's a connection with Rich Rod, but I think that's a big freaking deal. And the roster is not nearly good enough yet. And it cannot be this same roster going into September, or else you got some problems, no matter who's the coach. But they got to have time. Now it'll be easier to recruit. Maybe he'll bring some players of his in, and you go into that spring portal, and that's where it really can get crazy. But it can be crazy in a positive way of players coming in, whereas now you're worrying about players leaving and more players that are leaving, and more of an exodus where the players coming in are mostly Jack State guys. But Zac Alley is a solid hire. It could have been much worse. And they did not want to fire him at Oklahoma. They wanted to keep him, and he said, no, I'm going to Rich Rod. That's a big deal. That's where we are right now. I will wrap up this live edition here of Mountaineer Report. Again, hit up the coverage of WV Sports now. There's going to be a lot more of it coming, of course, in the coming days, weeks, months. This never sleeps, really, because of the coaching change, where we are here with the transfer portal and all of that. And even when the window closes, you can wipe sweat off your brow about Jaheim and company, but then there's going to be players maybe coming in that, committed or didn't commit or whatever. It's really never over until we kick it off for the next season. So hit up WV Sports now for the coverage. There's also basketball season going on, so feel free to hit that up as well. I'll join Cody for some coverage here as we get into the spring and actually use my season press pass, because I've been mostly letting Cody handle that because I've been knee deep in all of this. But WV Sports now for the site. Make sure to hit up the podcast on YouTube, like and subscribe, download there, notification bell there for any time we do this, and also download, subscribe, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, everywhere you get your podcasts. Mountaineer Report is at Mike Asti 11 for me on social media, and then I won't promote my national stuff or anything else I do in my career that's outside the West Virginia coverage on this, because you guys are Mountaineer fans. But anyone who wants any of that, come to me privately or go to at Mike Asti 11, find me on Google, go to maybe my website as well, because it's all there as well. But that'll do it for this live edition here of Mountaineer Report. I'm going to shut off the chat now. I see there are more questions coming in, but I've been doing this an hour and I have more to write. So that'll do it for this edition, this live chat edition of Mountaineer Report. Looks like West Virginia has a defensive coordinator, and looks like it's a major coup. Who would have thought it? West Virginia plucks a coach, a sitting DC for the same position from a blue blood like Oklahoma. That's already a different vibe than we've experienced throughout the last 6 years.